wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Phil Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers as we talk Seahawks football.
Hey Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers. Hey Keith.
Hey, so we got a preview show, the Seahawks on the road in Kansas City, taking on arguably the best team in the NFL. Yeah.
At least the best offense. Now their defense is kind of middling, but their offense is so good. You know, they put up 428 yards a game, which is, leads the NFL.
Which means they're going to get like 8,000 yards against Seattle because their defense is terrible.
Right. And that's a league average, over league average defenses, when you account for the entire season. So it could be brutal. The other thing to pay attention to in this game, and if you haven't noticed, it's the preview show this week for our show. It's supposed to feel like -6 degrees in Kansas City on Saturday with an actual, temperature of somewhere between 12 and 15, but the wind's going to be whipping around in Arrowhead Stadium between 12 and 15 miles an hour. So that'll be pleasant.
Yep. Yeah, pleasant. That's the right word.
That'll be the coldest game that Seattle will have ever played in, I believe. The one in Minnesota a few years back, as we remember, was brutal, where Blair Walsh missed that kick at the end of the game. Seattle walked away with the victory there. But I just remember that just being just cold. Everybody looked cold. It was awful. This is supposed to be even worse. But the only saving grace, I will say this, for this game is that the field itself is heated, thermally heated.
It is. That was a move that started, I believe, in Green Bay a few years before they did here in Kansas City. But these super cold weather stadiums, they put in basically water lines, plastic water lines through underneath the entire field, about 6 inches down, and they just pump hot water through it. And it heats the field. It stops the snow from building up. It keeps it from becoming rock hard. It actually makes for a good playing surface. So, it was one of those innovations that is very welcome, especially when you're a visiting team in one of these places.
Yeah, no, agreed. You're not hitting something rock hard. So that'll be a factor. And it is. It really, I think back to that Minnesota game. And it was a factor, the missed kick. But overall, Russell Wilson was able to complete a few key passes in that game. But it took him a while to get going. The first half in that game was just kind of back and forth, punts and runs. And nobody was really confident with the ball. But it should be interesting. Kansas City might be at home, and they're used to kind of playing in cold. But it's stupid cold. And so when it gets to be that point, nobody really is benefiting here. It just really comes down to, and I will say this, Kansas City has a propensity to turn the ball over, as it is anyway. They're -6 right now on turnover ratio, and that could be a factor. Patrick Mahomes has thrown some interceptions in the last 3 games. That's why they've allowed the Houston Texans and a few other teams to kind of hang around with them. I watched them earlier in the year, the first game of the year against the Arizona Cardinals here in the desert in Phoenix, where I'm at. And they looked just so dominant. I mean, in that game, I think Patrick Mahomes had 500 yards passing and 5 touchdowns. And Kelsey had, 175 yards reception, in receptions. And Kelsey's going to be a factor in this game too. Kelsey's got 1,150 yards, a bunch of touchdowns. It's his favorite weapon. The other couple players I thought I would mention off the top were the 2 wide receivers that Kansas City acquired in the offseason have just really worked out for them. Juju Smith-Schuster has 850 yards. He's their leading wide receiver. Marquise Valdez-Scantling, who kind of washed out in Green Bay. Kansas City just got him on a bare minimum contract, and he's come in and has 632 yards. So those three guys are their primary weapons.
Yeah, I mean, the Chiefs went. They decided to diversify that offense, right? They traded Tyreek Hill, brought in a couple of guys. Juju Smith-Schuster is a good player. Like, he's not a guy who washed out or anything. He's a guy that Pittsburgh would have loved to have back. And so, but they were able to get him for a fraction of what Hill would have cost. Also got the draft picks, the cap space, all those things. And it allowed them to kind of rebuild around, rather than just having it be Kelsey, Hill, and Mahomes. Now they've got a deeper offensive roster, a lot more weapons, even if none of them are quite as good as Hill. I mean, nobody is, but they're different, and they're a lot harder to defend now because you have to account for the whole field. You can't just double team those two guys and know that that's going to be enough.
Yeah, interesting. And they've got a great offensive line too. Creed Humphrey, the guy that Seattle used to draft, that name is just going to haunt me forever. He's at center, the best center in the NFL. Joe Thuney, Orlando Brown is there at left tackle, locks down that left side for them. Andrew Wiley on the other side, and of course Travis Kelsey, Noah Gray. They make a great combo as well. So all around, it's the best offense in football. It just is.
Yep.
And Patrick Mahomes is having another stellar year, over almost 4,500 yards.
He's turning the ball over more. I mean, he is having a great
11
year,
interceptions.
But he's turning the ball over more this year than in years past, and that's a little weird. But at the same time, it's not like he's not going full Jameis Winston here. He's got 11. Right.
Yeah. Well, and you're putting their defense on the field when you do that, and that's definitely not the strength of their team. They're a middling defense, somewhere between 15 and 20 in the NFL on most statistical categories, and that's where Seattle might be able to take advantage, especially if this game gets kind of rough as far as being cold. If Seattle can run the ball at all, that would be nice. Their defensive front, is pretty decent at stopping the run. They're number 5 overall in the NFL, but teams are usually playing catch up against Kansas City, so their numbers are diminished there a little bit. Mm-hmm. And Seattle does have some advantages on the offensive side of the ball if they can get the ball, especially in the middle of the field. I think against their linebackers, throws over the top, over the linebackers and safeties in space is the way to kind of take advantage of their offense and move the ball down the field in increments and not try to just take big shots all the time, and keep the clock going a little bit. That's Seattle's really, to me, only hope in this game is to at least equalize that time of possession, if not have some sort of advantage with time of possession, because you do want Kansas City's defense on the field if you're going to have any hope in this game. I don't expect that. I'm looking at this thing, Keith, and I'm just going, is there any way? Is there anything Seattle can do? And the only thing I can come up with is turnovers, because otherwise it's pretty clear that Kansas City is the superior team, talent-wise, and just, they're coming in with 11 wins or whatever it is. They're just a better team.
They're a better team right now. I mean, they are further along in their progression, and they've been trying to stay on top, and they did the Hill trade is going to keep them there, rather than trying to sign everyone and keep a quote unquote core together and then having all of the depth and stuff slowly disappear. They decided to move on, get those draft picks, get that cap space, diversify. They're going to be a better team for longer because of a trade like that. But yeah, I mean, you look at these teams, there's a lot of connection, I think, between these two. I mean, maybe for you and I more than anyone else, because the Creed Humphreys thing, it still just eats at me, because you and I were like pounding the table for Creed Humphreys.
Yeah, before the draft.
And then
he just happened to fall. The draft fell just the right way. He was sitting there, and we made the decision to go in a different direction.
We made the decision
third wide receiver
to draft a wide receiver that can't stay healthy,
right.
and even when healthy, isn't productive. When the guy who's now the best center in the NFL was sitting there,
all pro,
and freaking kind of, it still pisses me off because it seemed like such an obvious. Imagine what the Seahawks offense would look like as far like the running game and stuff if they had Creed Humphreys there instead of Austin Blythe right now. Right.
You'd mentioned a couple of draft picks as well. With that Hill trade, they ended up getting George Karlaftis, Leo Chanel, the linebacker, Jalen Watson later on at the cornerback from Washington State, has turned out to be a pretty decent player for them as well as kind of a third or fourth cornerback this year. Yep. And the connections to Seattle, Frank Clark and Carlos Dunlap.
Yeah, that's actually where I was thinking was the Frank Clark trade. It's been 4 years, but the Seahawks traded Frank Clark to Kansas City for a first round pick and I think like a third. They ended up, if you look at the Seahawks traded away other moves and they moved some stuff around and all of that. So it's kind of hard to identify just what players the Seahawks got for that trade because it provided them ammunition to move around in other spots of the draft. So it's a little weird, but
it made them reach, in the first round there for who was it?
LJ
Collier. So we ended up reaching after that trade for LJ Collier, which was the downfall there, I think, of that whole deal.
Yeah, but if the other players that you can associate with that trade for Seattle would be Cody Barton, who's been a great special teamer and backup linebacker. This year as a starter, he hasn't been as good, but and then Damian Lewis, starting guard, who's the best of the three interior guys that we always complain about.
Yeah.
So,
but Frank Clark went on to help them win. A lot of games.
And well, he went on to be especially disappointing in the regular season, but then come on late in the year and in the playoffs and make a big impact. Yeah. And
he does have some impact plays. He really does.
Yep.
But this year he's got 5 sacks. Chris Jones is their guy. Their guy with 11 with all the pressure rates and so forth. But Chris Jones has been playing 81% of the snaps this year to get those, up from 56% 3 years ago, 64% 2 years ago, 58% last year, now 81%. So his usage rate is way up. And so he's wearing down this time of the year. The last 3 games, he just hasn't really had any pressure or any sacks. Frank Clark, Carlos Dunlap are sitting there, but they have 9 sacks combined. And if you combine Frank Clark, Karlaftis, Dunlap, and Mike Dana, they have 59 pressures and 15 sacks on the entire season between those 4 players. And then you've got Jones, which is their premier guy, to kind of hold down the fort. But their defense is built around one guy. And that could be dangerous, especially this time of year if he is worn down. So that's another place where Seattle may be able to attack a little bit, especially late in the game.
Yeah, but if they're going to attack it late in the game, they need to be able to run the football. They need to be able to take advantage of that 82% usage rate by running the ball, keeping him on the field, making him work, and wearing him down. And then, then things should get better. But yeah, I mean, overall, this is a tough task. This really is a tough task for Seattle. Coming in, I mean, Seattle's banged up. Their lack of depth is showing. Definitely, come back to lost 4 of the last 5. Come back to earth completely. And now they go up against the best team in the NFL on the road in a hostile place.
And you've got to keep up. You got to figure out a way to keep up.
Yeah, Kansas City is like the one place that rivals Seattle in terms of crowd noise. I mean, officially they were louder on the individual decibel test, but on a play-to-play average, I think Seattle still wins. But it's close, right? You got these are the 2 great fan bases, and the cold is going to be a factor too. So you just look at all these things together, and it's a really tough task. For Seattle.
If there was ever a game against any offense this would be the game that you would want to have your running game be successful. You would want to be able to win in the trenches, to be able to push the ball and kind of dominate in the interior offensive line. And we just don't have the personnel to be able to do that. Yeah. We've had that ask. It's been on the table for the last 4 or 5 games. And we just haven't been able to do it regardless of opponent. Even if it's a middling interior defensive line, which we've faced on 3 or 4 of those occasions and still haven't been able to do it. Now you take a look at Ken Walker. I didn't practice yesterday. We'll see what happens as we get closer to Saturday, but right now it's looking questionable at best for him to be able to suit up. And then we're taking a look at DJ Dallas, hopefully is going to play. Travis Homer is going to be there. But after that, you're dealing with guys that have been on the practice squad for a while. So it's not optimal, to say the least. And they may have to ride Geno on this thing. And Geno's been kind of struggling as well lately.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then you also look at, the passing game is diminished without Tyler Lockett in there. And so that makes it harder. There just isn't the weapons anymore, because Seattle's built around 2 wide receivers. They've got 2 good wide receivers in Lockett and Metcalf. Well, without Lockett in there, that's half your passing weapons. And so,
and Eskridge hasn't been able to practice. He's still out. Goodwin's in there, and Derek Young, and they just signed to the 53-man roster. Laquan Treadwell has been on the practice squad for a couple of weeks, and he's been kind of around the league as a former first-round pick that hasn't really ever worked out.
Yeah. Big, tall guy, doesn't move well. I'm not sure why he was a first-round pick, to be honest, but everyone thought I was crazy when I said that. But yeah, I mean, he's tall. He's a guy that you can throw it up in the corner of the end zone and he can go get it, type of thing. But he doesn't run well enough to consistently get open. So
Seattle trusts him maybe more than Derek Young at this point, just because Young just doesn't have the route experience and so forth in the NFL. But I would run Derek Young out there, to be completely honest, and see what the kid's got. He's been in camp. He's been on the team for 13 games, 14 games now, and you just kind of have to see at this point in the season where you're at. Now, I get it. Pete Carroll's never one to start playing players because he just kind of wants to check them out. If he's still in the competition for a playoff spot, he's not out of contention, he's going to try to win. He's going to do everything he can roster-wise to do it. So I don't blame him.
But Treadwell has no they've got no one. He's got no future in Seattle. I mean, he's not a guy that's going to be around. He's not a guy this team's ever going to depend on for anything. Derek Young has some tremendous athleticism, some tremendous measurables that you saw. They flashed in training camp. They flashed in the preseason. The problem in the preseason was that he dropped a lot of passes. Okay, has he been working on that? He's been out there running routes, and I think he got a couple catches.
That didn't count last week against the sideline. I thought it was a great catch, and it just came back on a penalty. So
so
I mean, see more of that for sure.
Get him out there. Let him, because he's one of the guys with the athleticism to put pressure on the opposing defense. Even if he doesn't have the experience, even if he doesn't have quite the route tree, he can still run well enough to make life hard on the opposing team. I would rather see him out there than Treadwell. And then, of course, Goodwin's just pure speed. So they're gonna run him deep a lot too.
So it always comes down to this, especially this time of the year when things are looking kind of iffy, as far as what you're trying to look for out of this game.
Honestly, I want the Seahawks to start to get right a little bit. I mean, this isn't a team that this isn't a get right game, but I want them to start to look like they are competent at stopping the run again, that start to get where they can occasionally get pressure up the middle or on the outside, just get pressure on the quarterback, even if they're not getting home. Like the last few games, it's the defense, especially the up front, they've just been bad. and they haven't been able to do any of these things well. And I want to see them, doing their assignments. If somebody gets blocked out because their player in front of them is just better, fine. But to have big runs happen because people are not doing their assignment, they're like freelancing, that's got to stop. And so I want to see them do some of that stuff and see what this defense can be like going forward, because there's a lot of young talent here.
Yeah. How about on offense, Keith?
On offense, man, they've got to run the ball. In this weather, against this team, and you're the Seahawks, you have to be able to run the ball. Can you find a way to grind out some yards and actually have an effective running game for the first time in over a month? That's if they don't have a running game, they don't have a shot in this game.
So they might be giving the ball to Igwebuike, the kid that's been running back kicks here for the last 2 weeks. He looks kind of dynamic in open space, so they can figure out a way to get him open, maybe a few receptions out of the backfield, that sort of thing, to open that up and spread out. Kansas City is the best way. So if they can create some plays in space to spread them out, I think that's the best way to take advantage of a running game. I don't know if you're going to succeed. If I was Kansas City, I'd be doing what everyone else has been doing: stack the box and make Seattle fail on first and second down running the ball and force Geno to throw.
Yeah, I mean
it's easier to defend that way. True,
and that's why the Seahawks their offense works best when Geno's throwing the ball on first down, 60% of the time. And they're running because then you can't stack the box. You've got to look at Seattle's offense as a complete, picture and look and defend the whole field. And so they need to do that, but they also, when they run it, they need to be effective at running it. If it's 2nd and 3, and you run the ball, you should be able to get that first down. And right now they're getting a yard, and they're bringing up 3rd and 2.
Yeah.
Like they need to get through that. They need to, get to a point where they're running the ball effectively again. And they haven't. Early in the season, they were running it great. Penny had some good games in there. Walker looked like he had a shot at offensive rookie of the year. And then suddenly midseason, it's like all of a sudden now they can't run on anyone.
It's just really hard to run on Chris Jones and Nick Bolton, their middle linebacker. Those guys in the middle just really plug that thing up. And then when you try to get outside, you've got Frank Clark there, you've got Carl Loftus. It's just really challenging. They make it really challenging. And Willie Gay, too, their weak side linebacker, has a ton of speed and a big player, and used effectively. Now, against the pass, guys like Willie Gay can't do it. Nick Bolton is awful in coverage. So if they can take advantage of trying to either run some screens or our tight ends, that could be a way that we could march down the field a little bit, convert third downs. I'd like to see the tight ends really used in this game.
Oh, the tight ends have to be used. We were talking about the wide receiver depth issues that Seahawks have. The way you combat that, you don't have the talent at wide receiver to go, oh, we got Lockett, next guy is going to step up and replace him. Where the talent is at the tight end position. You've got 3 tight ends that can all play. They're all good players, good pass catchers, good route runners. Get them out there, rotate them through, put one of them in the slot, 2 of them on the line if you have to. Like, go with some 13 personnel and then throw out of that, because you're going to create mismatches.
The nice thing about, if you can call it nice, in Kansas City's offense is it all runs through Patrick Mahomes. It's a pretty predictable situation.
It's predictable and impossible to stop.
They don't run the ball very much, and they throw a lot, and they're very successful at it. But that's Seattle's strength, actually, is defending the pass when you've got Tariq Woolen there. Quandre Diggs is kind of a ball hawk, sort of free safety. Has been dropping a few lately, but in the past he's had 5 or 6 interceptions each year. It'd be nice for those guys, those two particularly, to generate some turnovers. Maybe, Kobe Bryant ball punch out type of thing. Because I'm serious. If we can take 2 or 3 drives away from Kansas City because of turnovers, and Seattle doesn't turn the ball over on the other side, that's the best chance I think that Seattle has to win this game.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that you've got a situation where the Seahawks have to figure out how to get pressure on Mahomes. He's one of the guys that can run around and make plays even when you do get pressure. Like, you have to get home on him, but at the same time, like, they've got to be able to do something. And if they're not going to be able to, it's going to be a long game.
Kansas City's only allowed 27 sacks, and I think they've got one of the best pressure rates for an offensive line in the entire league as well. So a lot of teams aren't getting home. But yeah, it'd be nice to figure out a way, or have a career game from one of our guys, Darrell Taylor, LJ Collier in his only move, which is a bull rush. I mean, just get anything to disrupt timing, and that gives your team an opportunity. And they've been turning the ball over lately, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's going to take. They're going to have, the Chiefs let a team like Houston hang around. They turned the ball over. They made some mistakes defensively and whatever, but Houston just doesn't have the talent to finish that. As you've seen, like, pretty much the last 6 weeks where they've been in position, to get a win and then find ways to lose.
Yeah.
They just don't have the talent to take advantage of the situations they find themselves in. Seattle's a much better team. Like, if Kansas City lets Seattle hang around, Seattle can win this.
So the Bengals beat the Chiefs December 4th. The Broncos hung on December 11th and dropped that game by 8 points at the end, 34-28. The Texans went to overtime with the Chiefs, and the Chiefs beat them with a touchdown there after a couple of possessions in overtime. So it'll be interesting to see. The weather's a huge factor here, and nobody really likes to talk about the weather as being a factor in football. When the wind chill is -5, I think you do factor that in, because it is cold, and the ball is really hard, and the wind is going to be swirling around in that stadium. It's hard to kick anyway if the wind's blowing just straight, but if it's swirling and coming from different directions, it's going to be tough. It's going to be so tough,
because you're there and you look at the flags on the goalpost, and they'll be going one direction, and then you look up just above that at the flags that are in the rim of the stadium, and they're going in the opposite direction, and you're like, how is this ball going to curve when you hit it? And especially because when you're on the field, you're going to feel something even different beyond that. It's a real hard place to kick.
Yeah, it's a real hard place to kick in September. And it's one of those true home field advantage places to play, as you mentioned earlier. So it'll be interesting. Okay, prediction time, Keith. Be real with me. Be honest. What are we looking at here?
We're looking at a long game. I think we're looking at a game where Kansas City puts up some points on Seattle because the defense is terrible, and Seattle just can't hang with them. They just don't have the talent offensively, on basically the lack of Tyler Lockett, the lack of a running game because of the interior offensive line, a lack of pass protection up the middle, is going to make life hard. I think Kansas City kind of runs away with this one. I'm looking at like 31-17.
Yeah, if we can put up 17, without a run game, I don't even know if we can get to 17, like 13, 10, something like that. If we can run the ball, I think that we can hang for a while. I think they pull away, but it's one of those deals where we just don't have enough on defense to stop them. So I watched that game earlier in the year, and Patrick Mahomes was just like a surgeon, going all over the field, took advantage of everything that the Cardinals were not able to do on defense. Now, I think Seattle has the potential to be just slightly better than the Cardinals were on defense that I witnessed, but still not enough to stop the best passer in the NFL and the best offense as far as yards and points is concerned. On the offensive side, I think that we can be successful, but the opportunities that we have, I think the time of possession is going to eventually just kill us in this game, because I just don't think that we're going to have the opportunities unless we get turnovers. If we can get 2 or 3 turnovers and we don't turn the ball over ourselves, and we can equalize this game as far as time of possession, we have a chance. And if that's the case, we could be looking at some of these other close games that they've been able to give opportunities to, like the Texans and the Broncos and so forth. Otherwise, this thing is going to get away, and I think it will eventually. So I'm with you. I think that, we're probably talking like 27 to 17, 27 to 13, something like that, Kansas City.
Yeah. That sucks. It's bad when you and I both think it's going to be lopsided against Seattle, because we are two of the more positive, optimistic guys
sure.
out there. And we both think Seattle's going to get pummeled. So that's not a good place to be.
I think that when you get to this time of the year, you know what you are. You're no longer speculating that, hey, we can pull this out if this and this and this happens. We've seen it over and over now. We kind of know who we are. We're a team that can't defend the run and have really struggled defending the pass as well. And then you're dealing with the best offense in football. And on the other side, we've been really struggling lately. Gino's been throwing some interceptions. He's been throwing some balls that should have been intercepted. And then our running game is just non-existent. Mm-hmm. And when you combine all of that on the road against Kansas City, a playoff team, a contender for the AFC overall and in the Super Bowl, it's not a very good matchup for the Seahawks. And I'm just trying to be real. Now, is there always a chance to win? Absolutely. And if they do, I'll be as happy as a camper, because the next 2 games after this, they've really got an opportunity. They could get back into the playoff race, and that's a whole new thing, and it's fun, and you go steal a game in the playoffs, and that's great. All right. I think that's it, Keith. Let's go have some fun, watch the game. Game's on Saturday this week, on Christmas Eve. So that'll be a fun game to watch, and be warm, everybody in front of their own TVs. And if you're at the game by chance, if you're a Seahawk fan, I'm thinking of Dana O'Gorman. Wear layers, be warm, some warmers in the pockets, all that kind of stuff. So, all right. You can find Keith.
Warmers in your shoes.
Yeah. Around your neck, the whole thing. Yeah.
Everything. It's going to be cold.
All right. You know where to find us. Find Keith, find myself. And when you find the show, make sure you hit subscribe. That really helps. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.